Hey everyone, this is Lisa from Life in Layouts, and I've decided that I'm going to tackle all of these layouts that I have already planned, but free will isn't nearly as fun. Alright, so let's see what the spinner wheel has in store for us today. It looks like it's going to be the 2021 splash pad. Alright, that is totally spelled wrong, but let's jump into my scrapbook room. Alright, so this one is going to be a little bit different. I have these photos that I had planned out for the splash pad, and I had an idea in mind when I was planning these out. I'm going to be using a page map sketch from December 2009. These photos are from the zoo. So my original thought was I absolutely want to use the Simple Stories Into the Wild collection, but these don't really fit my theme. But it's a one-page layout that I know is going to sit next to another layout with this collection. So then I started to look through my photos to see what I plan to pair with these photos. These photos are going to sit next to another single page layout, and they are going to be of the kids with this little elephant. This is very much the zoo, and I will absolutely use this collection. So then I started to look through my collections to see what would work. And I pulled out the Hello Summer collection from Echo Park. Now, if you put these two together, you're like, that doesn't really look like they would work together well, Lisa. But in this bag where I keep all of the supplies, you can see I have a ton of scraps. I've actually done quite a few layouts with this collection, and it's at the point where it is pretty close to being done, but I have so many scraps left. I also did put in this Fun in the Sun. It's also from Echo Park, and the colors work really well with this Hello Summer. So there's a mix of both of those collections. So when I was looking through the paper to see what would work, I found this paper that comes from the Fun in the Sun. And these colors work well with the colors that are in the Into the Wild collection. So let's jump in and start to create this one-page layout. I'm also going to create the other carousel one-page layout. And at the end of the video, you'll be able to see how I took these two different collections that don't look like they would work together, and I will show you how the layouts come together and work cohesively in the album. Now, I know that some people don't care about whether or not their layouts match with each other. I have a type A personality, and when they go in my albums, they have to match, which is why I do double page layouts. And when I do single page layouts, I make sure that I plan them. So even if I'm not using the same collection, they work well together. So let's jump in. Alright guys, so I am going to start working on the photos from the splash pad, and like I said earlier, I'm going to be using this triangle paper, and I think the colors work so well with the Simple Stories Zoo paper as well. I did pull out this green cardstock because I felt like I needed some solid, and I had used the green in another layout, so it was in my scraps from the zoo. I also pulled out this orange cardstock, but I don't end up using it. I then pulled out the yellow stripe as well as the green polka dot because I was looking for something to use for the scalloped edges that are on the sketch. I decided that I would go ahead and trim down my photos, and I remember when I was planning this one out, I liked the configuration, but my photos were a little bit different. So my notes actually say to use the configuration but make it work for my photos. I really just liked the fact that the photos were scattered around, they were overlapping each other. That gave me the opportunity to add some fun foam behind some of them, making them pop up. And there is a lot of dead space in the photos because I was sitting down while the kids were playing in the splash pad, so I did have lots of the area of the splash pad that I knew that I could cover up with some of the other photos. Once I got them all cut out, I decided to work on the scallops. I'm going to start with this yellow paper as well as my circle cutters from Creative Memories. I pulled out my T-square ruler and I drew a line. That gave me the area to add the circle edge to, and then I just drew a half circle. I had never done this before and it was just kind of winging it, but it doesn't work out like I thought. I should have gone up higher on the paper. I'm going to realize that when I get towards the end of fussy cutting these scallops out, because I actually end up cutting the very last one too much and it ends up bending the paper, I was like, it's just not enough. So I was frustrated with myself and I thought, I'll just take a break from that. Go ahead and get my photos matted. Of course, I'm using the white cardstock from the background to mat my photos because it is going to be covered up with that triangle paper. I pulled out my layering guides. I do have a tutorial for this and it's linked below if you'd like to check it out. I love these things, especially since I do gut my paper in this way to mat my photos. It just allows me to be able to use up that background paper and mat all of my photos. Once I matted my photos, I go ahead and add some adhesive all around the background paper. I was making sure that I had all of the small areas covered with adhesive. Then I'm going to lay my pattern paper down and of course adding some washi tape on the back. This just helps when I am putting the layout in my album that it doesn't get snagged with the layout that's behind it. I then added this green cardstock just to finish off that edge. And the other issue that I had was that yellow paper was just too busy against the triangle paper. So I had two issues. One, the edges weren't big enough, and then two, it was just too busy. So I had already pulled out the green polka dotted paper and I just used that yellow paper as a template to trim out the green paper. I moved the scallops up so that I would have more of an edge, and I just really like the way that this looks. I did decide to just use 3, so I did cut one of them off, and then I pulled out this distress tool. Whenever I do fussy cutting on large items like this, I like to use that distress tool because it covers up any of the imperfections that I make when I am fussy cutting. Then I'm going to lay my photos out again so that pre-planning of laying them out before I matted them doesn't go as planned because I wasn't thinking about the fact that I needed to have that scallop there. So I rearranged them just a little bit and I really like this configuration. It allows me to get lots of photos on this layout. So there are 6 photos on this single page layout. The largest being a 3x4. I did trim those down so that they were a little bit thinner, and then the smallest being a 2x2. But this allowed me to zoom in on the photos because there were a lot of kids playing in the splash area, and I was able to zoom in on just the photos of my kids as well as my friends' kids. You guys know that I have to pull out my T-square ruler because I can't get anything straight without it. I did decide to put most of the photos down flat, and then I have 2 of them up on some foam adhesive to give it a little bit of dimension. I probably should have put this photo down first before I put the ones above it because I did struggle a little bit and I had to move it around, but I did ultimately get it in, as well as the photo that's on the lower left-hand side. I looked through my scraps from the Fun in the Sun collection and I found a couple that I thought would work. This first one is the 3x4 card that says Hello Summer, and then I also have just this random scrap of orange stripe paper. I pulled out my border punch in the notebook punch and added that border, and then I also had just this random piece of yellow cardstock. At first I thought I would overlap the yellow and the orange, but I didn't like the way that that looked. And ultimately what I end up doing is moving the orange paper down. I also really wasn't liking the Hello Summer yellow card next to that yellow piece of banner paper. So I looked through the zoo stuff and I found the Life's a Zoo tag and I added that, and I like how that color contrasts against the triangles. I went ahead and added all the pieces down, and I was going to add this border strip, but then realized I was going to be adding green right next to green. And while these colors work well together, they're not the exact same color. So I pulled out this other banner strip from the Fun in the Sun collection. It's like a tone-on-tone pink, and it's just large enough to separate those 2 green patterns that it makes it work really well. Of course, the banner strip is not a full 12 by 12, and I just hid that behind that yellow piece of paper. And then I added the zoo tag. I also added a yellow tab at the top, and later on off camera I am going to add a word phrase that says best day ever. I then started looking through the sticker sheet from the collection, and I'm just adding pieces that I thought would work. There were these 2 word phrases that said hot and play. Thought that was perfect for this. I really wanted to add this too much fun in the sun, but it just didn't look right. But I was able to find another sticker that said fun in the sun, so I added that right below the Life's a Zoo. I also added a pink camera, and then I pulled out the brads from the collection. I really like that Echo Park has their brads with other pieces, like this one is a flower and then the brad is in the center of it. I feel like it just adds so much to these types of brads. I then added another little brad that has a leaf on it right next to the pink camera. From the chipboard pieces, I found a yellow star and I added that next to the brad. And you can see how this layout is really starting to come together with using the Echo Park collection as well as the Simple Stories collection. I'm trying to pull in any of the pieces from the Simple Story collection that would work with this water theme layout so that when I do go to create the other page, the colors will tie in together. I found another camera that's a sticker. I did put that up on FunFoam. I'm perfectly okay with having two different types of cameras on my layout. Over on the far right hand side, I found a floral that matched the florals that were on that tag. And then I also pulled out a brad that has a bunch of different leaves. Of course, I had to add some jute twine to my tag hole and then using my glue dots to make sure that the jute twine stays in place where I want it to on my layout. I ended up adding 2 glue dots to this particular jute twine because I wanted it to go up, but then also swirl back down. Then I'm just going to make sure that everything is secured down. And then I fluffed up the edge of the notebook paper as well as the green scallop border. I found this journaling card from the zoo collection that has a little elephant and he's like splashing water out of his trunk, and I thought that that was perfect. So I went over to my printer, and normally I just print it out on some cheap paper that you can get at like Walmart, and I create a journaling box that is the same size as the inner white part of this tag. And then I just move the words around until it fits into the space that's available. I wanted the wording to go around the elephant. It did take me a couple times to get it done, but once I had the configuration right, I added my tag right on top of the journaling that I had already printed out and ran it through my printer again. I'm just looking through the tags there, trying to find something else to connect the brad to that tag, and I find this word that says "so thrilling." And then I pulled out my enamel dots in yellow, orange, and green and added those around the clusters in the layout. Sometimes my enamel dots need a little extra glue because the adhesive sticks to the backing. I'm not sure if it's because like I'm using cheaper enamel dots or if it's because we're in Florida and just the heat of this place doesn't allow adhesive to stick to things. But I just use some liquid adhesive and don't usually have any issues with it. All right, and now I'm going to move over to my other one-page layout. This one's also a page map sketch from June of 2009, and I'm going to flip this around so that the white part of the layouts are together in the center, and I'll show you guys that at the very end. For this one, I only have 3 photos, and we found this statue that's kind of right outside of the carousel at the zoo, and it's a horse that's a carousel piece. So it actually has like the pole that you would normally see on a carousel. Eli jumped on it, and then we just kind of had the kids stand around it and take some photos. So there's not really anything special to it, but I thought that they were some cute photos and I could absolutely create a one-page layout with it. I knew that I had to use this elephant paper, but it was a little large in the 12 by 12. Luckily, I had the 6 by 8 pattern, and I decided that I would use that and just piece it together and cover up the seams with my photos. I also wanted to use the green polka dotted paper so that I could tie in both of these single page layouts. I decided to cut down the elephant paper to 2 inches, and I needed obviously 2 of those so that I could make it span the width of the layout. And then I cut down the green paper. At first I thought I was going to put the elephant paper over on the far right, but then I realized that I wouldn't be able to cover it up with my photos. And I thought maybe I could use some tags, but ultimately I do move it over to the center of the layout so that I could cover up that seam. Of course, I'm going to use that same technique of using the background paper to mat my photos. Because I was using just that green paper, I wasn't for sure how much I could get. I did decide to trim down my 4x6 photo just a little bit, and I knew that I would have to pull out some white cardstock from my stash as well. I normally have just a bin of white scraps that I use for my journaling or when I'm making dickers or when I need to mat photos. So I just pulled out an extra piece to mat one of those smaller photos. So I get all 3 of those photos matted, and then I'm going to add that green polka dotted paper right on top of those holes. And of course, adding the washi tape to the back of the layout. I'm then going to add the elephant paper down. And I thought I was going to add the elephant paper right next to the green polka dot, but I thought I needed to add this triangle paper from the other one-page layout to tie the colors in. And I think that it works so well next to that green polka dotted paper as well as the elephant paper. I did decide to add a scalloped border because on the other layout I have the green border sticker that I used, and it also has a scallop. So while they're different, I feel like it just ties both of those layouts together. So by doing little things like that, it really does bring these 2 single page layouts into a cohesive look. I thought about adding this stripe paper down in the 1/4-inch strip, but it was just way too busy right next to that triangle paper. So I opted to have just an orange solid piece. And I think that ties in the orange stripe paper as well as my journaling tag because it has an orange border. I'm going to overlap these photos very similar to how I overlapped the photos from the splash pad, using the fun foam on some of them as well to mirror that type of technique. Again, trying to tie these in. So I did decide to add 2 of them down flat to the layout, and then I added 1 up on fun foam. I decided that I would have my title for this side to be Stay Wild, and I also pulled in the triangle banner from the chipboard pieces, and I think that that ties in the triangle paper from the other side. Of course, I had to add some liquid adhesive to both of these chipboard pieces. I thought about adding this leaf to the bottom of the Stay Wild, but I just wasn't liking it over there, so I ended up adding it to the far left-hand side. And then I just added that triangle banner right underneath the Stay Wild, and it fit perfectly. I was super excited about that. I also added a tab to the left-hand side of the photo. I then pulled out the puffy stickers from the collection because I wanted to make sure that I had the same types of elements from the splash pad layout. I had added puffy stickers to that one, so I wanted to make sure I added puffy stickers to this layout as well. I found a camera from the chipboard pieces and added that right above the title. It is the same camera that I used on the other layout. The other one was a sticker and this one's a chipboard, but they're the exact same camera. This one is a little bit smaller than the sticker. I then pulled out the enamel dots in green, orange, and yellow and added those to the clusters as well. And then you can see here how these 2 layouts come together. That is it for this video. Here is my final layout as well as some close-ups. I did do my journaling for both of these layouts. The journaling for my splash pad layout says, during our visit to the Tampa Zoo, the blazing Florida sun didn't slow the kids down once they found the splash pad in the Australia realm. They raced through fountains, dodged water arches, and laughed under tipping buckets of cool water. It was a perfect way to beat the heat. And then I added the date. And then for the journaling on the Stay Wild side, I have still dripping from the splash pad. We wandered past the carousel and found this elephant. It was a perfect spot for a few silly photos. Eli climbed on and we struck our best poses, letting our wild side show before heading off for more zoo fun. All right, if you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already and you want to see more double page layout inspiration, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks everyone for watching, and I hope that you have a scrappy day.